Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan Lugo. Thanks so much for tuning in here on Thursday, January 30th. Today we're talking about the Jaguars' salary cap situation specifically. And this is going to be nothing personal. This is not going to actually have any of my opinions regarding who the Jaguars should cut, who they should keep. We're just looking at the cap flexibility that the Jaguars currently have heading into this 2025 campaign. You've got a brand new head coach. You're going to have a brand new general manager, it looks like, as well. Liam Cohen could potentially want to shape this team more into his image. There's obviously going to be a core group of players sticking around for at least the next couple years. You look at Trevor Lawrence, obviously going to be around for quite a while. Josh Hines-Allen, Foye Oluokun, Tyson Campbell, Brian Thomas Jr., you've got guys in place that you feel really good about, right? Anton Harrison, Walker Little. But there's certainly a lot of change that could be made with this roster. And so we're going to take a look at the different ways the Jaguars can create cap flexibility here today. They currently have $32 million in projected cap space for 2025, according to overthecap.com. Now, overthecap.com yesterday had the Jaguars at 35, so I'm not sure if there's some sort of deadline that just hit where they lost $3 million or somebody got guaranteed $3 million at a certain point in time or what happened there. But the Jaguars are projected $32 million according to overthecap.com, which is my top resource for salary cap information. I think they're the most accurate. So you just go through the roster and look at the flexibility the Jaguars have with the cap. And again, I'm not even talking about my opinions on this stuff. This is just brass tacks, right? If the Jaguars and Liam Cohen want to create as much cap flexibility for free agency and for the future as they possibly can and create this team a little bit more in their own image, this is how they're going to potentially do it, right? So Christian Kirk, the Jaguars can save $10.4 million against the cap by releasing him. And now the Jaguars, you can also factor in post-June 1 cuts, you're going to save a little bit more money against the cap, but you don't get that money to spend against the cap until after June 1st. So that's something to keep in mind. And each team can do 2 post-June 1 cuts. But we're just looking at pre-June 1 now to keep it simple. So Christian Kirk, the Jaguars, if they decide to move on from Christian Kirk, would save $10.4 million against the cap, right? So $32 million, I'm doing a little running tally here, plus 10.4 is, as I'm not doing a very good job with my calculator here, 32 plus 10.4. Thank you very much. $42.4 million by releasing Christian Kirk. Evan Ingram, the Jaguars could save essentially $6 million by releasing Evan Ingram. That's $48.4 million right there with 2 cuts. Mitch Morse, there's a lot more dead money than there is cap savings. You'd only save about $735,000 against the cap. So I don't know that that's a direction they want to go. He's a good veteran presence. Maybe you do bring in a center of the future, but that's not really saving you much money. You look at Ronald Darby, the Jaguars could certainly stand to save money by moving on from Darby, who had a down year in Jacksonville last year. 2.4 million essentially the Jaguars could save by moving on from Darby, which gets them to $50.8 million. Josh Reynolds is still on the roster. The Jaguars signed him late. The Jaguars could move on from him and save $4.26 million according to overthecap.com. So we'll add 4.2. That's $55 million in cap space. Devin Duvernay, an interesting one, right? I don't think that does he have how much value do you place on special teams, on a returner, right? I don't know. And how much value do you place on him as a receiver? Again, I don't know. But if the Jaguars decided they wanted to move on, they could save $2.7 million, which gets them to $57.7 million. You've also got Luke Fortner, who Liam Cohen did coach at Kentucky for a little while. But again, this is not taking into account any personal feelings, anything like that. This is just brass tacks. The Jaguars could save $3.3 million in cap space by moving on from a backup center that looks like he probably isn't going to be a starter in the future, right? So plus 3.3 million. The Jaguars are now at $61 million in cap space, right? Andrew Wingard is another player the Jaguars could decide to move on, elect to move on from. I don't know that they should. I don't think they should. He's a great special teamer. He's a good leader as well. But maybe he wants a chance to start somewhere and the Jaguars aren't going to give him that opportunity, something like that, right? I don't know that he would get the opportunity elsewhere, but the Jaguars could save $2.5 million by moving on from Andrew Wingard. Now, you've also got Buster Brown, who, again, I don't think is a starter. He's not really getting paid as a starter. He's still on his rookie deal, but the Jaguars could save $3.3 million by moving on from Buster Brown as well. That's $66.8 million. Daniel Thomas, they could save $1.8 million by moving on from. So you're starting to get the pick. Like the Jaguars could very easily end up with over $70 million in salary cap space should they choose. And I don't think they will choose to release all these guys. I absolutely don't. It's just kind of a picture of how the Jaguars can create even more flexibility than they already have with the cap. And sitting at $32 million, if you make a couple moves and you get yourself to 40 plus million, you're going to have more than enough cap space to execute any potential big signings that you would want to. Because let's say you sign, and I talk about this all the time, but just got to refresh y'all. Let's say you go sign Trey Smith. Pay him at the top of the market at guard. The Jaguars are probably going to need a guard with the Brandon Sheriff situation, right? $22 million would be top of the market for the guard position. So you're probably looking at 35 to 40% of the average annual value, $22 million, being the year one cap hit for that player. That's how the Jaguars have been writing contracts. I imagine that's how they'll continue to write contracts, thanks to Shad Khan being willing to write big signing bonuses, and then the signing bonuses prorate over the length of the contract, right? You can also add void years, which Trent Baalke started doing. I don't know that you should get into the void year ball game too much, because that's when you can really start impacting future cap quite a bit if you do that a lot and add a lot of void money to those void years. But you can certainly write contracts with these signing bonuses and end up with about 40% of the average annual value as your year one cap hit. So again, going back to the Trey Smith example, if you sign him for $22 million per year, you're talking about probably $9-ish million against the cap in 2025, and then you'll have a big cap hit in year two, and then you could move on depending on how long the contract. If you sign him to a 3-year deal, you can get out after year two. If you can sign him to a 4-year deal, you get out after year 3, in all likelihood, the way contracts are written in the NFL these days. So that's just kind of a look at what the Jaguars have from a cap maneuverability standpoint. They could do a lot. Again, you talk about making some of these moves we talked about. Let's say you get to 40, 50 million. You spend $9 million on Trey Smith, again, in year one, salary cap hit. You still got a ton of money to go spend on a corner, on a safety, on a backup edge player, right? So the Jaguars can pretty easily address all their needs in free agency if they choose to. They can create more needs and more need for depth if they really want to start squeezing pennies at the bottom. Those guys we talked about, where you're saving $2 million, $3 million, $1 million, $1.5 million, right? 2.5. Like, you can really start squeezing those pennies and creating more depth issues, more needs. But maybe, again, you want to really create this roster in your image if you're Liam Cohen. The Jaguars have a lot of draft picks over the next 2 years. He talked about that. He's excited about that. They have 20 draft picks scheduled for the next 2 years. They have a lot of cap flexibility in 2025 and 2026. It'll start to get tighter down the road when you're starting to get that Trevor Lawrence extension. Trayvon Walker is going to be on an extension eventually. They might sign him this year, but I would imagine the Jaguars would pick up the 5th-year option for Trayvon, and then so his extension wouldn't start until 2027, right? So you've got a lot of cap flexibility, a lot of cap maneuverability. If you have an owner like Shad Khan who is willing to allow the management team, the front office, to maneuver the cap and massage the cap consistently, you can have a situation like this where the cap is always pretty flexible, pretty healthy, even when you have some big contracts on the books. And so that is one big benefit of having Shad Khan around. We'll see how this ends up playing out. Just wanted to give y'all an update on how the salary cap's looking, how that flexibility can end up permeating throughout this roster. So let me know what y'all think in the comment section below. We will talk more about the potential roster cuts and who I think maybe they should cut, who they shouldn't cut. We'll get into that, but this was just a intro look at the Jaguars salary cap for 2025. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. Y'all have a good one.